At 6, Austria becomes the first country in Europe to make vaccinations compulsory as coronavirus cases on the continent soar. Austria is going back into a complete national lockdown. Christmas markets in parts of Germany are cancelled in what ministers there say is a national emergency. Across the UK, cases remain high, but experts say the vaccination rates and the booster programme could make the difference.
I wouldn't assume we are going to follow the same trajectory as Europe, but we're watching very closely and obviously there is concern.
Also on the programme tonight. Police reveal the hospital bomb in Liverpool contained ball bearings as shrapnel and could have caused significant injury or death. Cricket bosses promise action after the racism experienced by Yorkshire player Azim Rafiq. As migrants are moved from the Polish border into a warehouse in Belarus, the president of Belarus admits his security forces may have helped them try to cross into the EU. And mobile phones and driving, how the rules are getting much tighter from next year.
And coming up on the BBC News channel, Tim Payne steps down as Australia Test captain before the Ashes over a historical investigation into sexually explicit text to a female colleague.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC News at 6. A record number of coronavirus infections across much of continental Europe is pushing countries back towards tighter restrictions, even full lockdowns again. From Monday, Austria will return to a national lockdown. It's also become one of the first countries in the world to make COVID vaccinations compulsory. Germany's health minister called the situation there a national emergency and told Germans a lockdown couldn't be ruled out. Elsewhere, much tighter restrictions for the unvaccinated are being introduced. Across the UK, the number of new infections remains high, but is falling, according to the latest study, prompting experts to say the UK could be on a different path, as our health editor Hugh Pym reports.
Looking ahead to Christmas, but before then the Austrian people are facing bleak winter weeks with a 20-day lockdown from Monday. They'll only be allowed to leave home for work, exercise or shopping for essentials. And vaccination against COVID will become compulsory in February.
Despite months of persuasive efforts, despite media campaigns, despite all discussions, we did not manage to convince enough people to get vaccinated.
At the start of the week, Austria planned restrictions on those who hadn't been jabbed. But infections carried on rising, and now a tougher set of measures.
I don't actually mind being at home. I have a job which I can do from home. It doesn't bother me much, but I will miss the cafe, of course. There is no other way, even though I don't like it. In literature, you can read that pandemics last at least 3 years, and we should avoid that.
So will Germany follow Austria with lockdown restrictions? Ministers said nothing was being ruled out and rising case numbers had created a national emergency. While UK daily cases relative to the population haven't surged, Germany's have accelerated and are now not far behind. The Netherlands and Austria have imposed different forms of lockdown as their infection rates soared. So what does this mean for the UK? Some argue that more immunity's been built up after previous infections and the rest of Europe is now following.
Maybe they are actually experiencing what some parts of the UK experienced a little bit earlier in the autumn with Delta, with things opening up and with the vaccines not fully kicking in, particularly for people in midlife. That may be the pattern. I wouldn't assume we are going to follow the same trajectory as Europe, but we're watching very closely and obviously there is concern.
The latest infection survey from the Office for National Statistics suggests that in England last week, 1 in 65 people had the virus, lower than the previous week. In Wales, it was 1 in 55, also down. In Scotland, with 1 in 95 people, case rates were said to be broadly level. In Northern Ireland, with 1 in 65 people, the trend was said to be uncertain.
It's entirely up to you which arm you want to have in.
Experts say the future path of COVID is hard to predict. Much will depend on the vaccine rollout. The Scottish Government says its certificate scheme has contributed to a small rise in take-up among young people, and it may be extended. As in all the UK's nations, case data will be watched as closely as ever. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Let's go to Austria now. Our Europe correspondent Bethany Bell joins us from Vienna. So lockdown, full national lockdown from Monday. The population has to be vaccinated from the 1st of February. What has the reaction been there?
Frustration and some anger about the prospect of a new lockdown. But the real controversy here in Austria tonight is about the plans of the government to make everybody get a COVID jab by February. Austria is the first country in Europe to announce plans like this. It says it's doing it because Austria's vaccination rates are too low. About 2/3 of Austrians are vaccinated, and that's one of the lowest rates in Western Europe. Now, some people say that this is a good idea, but others, like the far-right opposition Freedom Party, say the move is unconstitutional, and they've called for protests against it. The government says there are plans for this to be legal because you can do this during a pandemic. Others say it's about time everybody got jabbed.
Bethany Bell, thank you. Well, here, the government's latest coronavirus figures for the UK show there were 44,000 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. That's nearly 4,000 more cases than last Friday. So an average of just over 40,000 cases were reported per day in the last week. More than 8,000 people were in hospital with COVID as of yesterday. There were 157 deaths. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive test, which means the average number of deaths over the past 7 days was 148. The total number of people who have died with COVID now stands at 143,716. On vaccinations, just over 88% of people aged 12 and over have now received a first dose, 80% have been double jabbed, and more than 14.2 million people have received their booster jab. The England and Wales Cricket Board says the culture of the game has to change and promised wide-ranging action to tackle discrimination after a crisis summit at the Oval today. It follows Azim Rafiq's revelations of racism while playing for Yorkshire County Cricket Club. Today, a former England player, Alex Hales, apologised for causing offence after a photo emerged of him dressed up in black makeup while at a party in 2009. Our sports correspondent Laura Scott reports.
After another turbulent week, cricket's latest response to its racism crisis talks at the Oval today, as the game joined forces in tackling its discrimination problem.
What do you hope to get out of the meeting today?
Just clarity and togetherness, I suppose.
Does cricket have a racism issue?
Well, we've got a lot of work to do, there's no doubt about it.
Last night, the former England cricketer Alex Hales became further embroiled in the scandal after a photo emerged showing him dressed in a racially offensive way at a fancy dress party in 2009. He said his appearance was a tribute to the late rapper Tupac Shakur, but apologised in a video message.
I deplore all forms of racism and discrimination. I've been incredibly lucky to play around the world in different backgrounds with players, different races, different cultures.
Earlier this week, there was widespread praise for Azim Rafiq as the whistleblower gave harrowing testimony to MPs about his experiences of racism in cricket and spoke of his hopes that speaking up would bring about change.
I'm very determined that this is going to be looked back as the moment where not only sport but society as a whole went in a different direction to what it's been going.
But the former Yorkshire player has been forced to front up to his own mistakes, apologising after Facebook messages from 2011 surfaced showing him using anti-Semitic language. In a statement, he said, "I have absolutely no excuses. I am ashamed of this exchange. I was 19 at the time and I hope and believe I am a different person today." He later apologised for another racially offensive social media post. Rafiq's own use of discriminatory language has been described as awkward by the Jewish Leadership Council, while others say it only serves to highlight the scale of the problem in cricket. Today came an acceptance within the game that collective action is the only way to resolve this crucial issue. In a joint statement following the meeting, cricket chiefs said they'd been shocked, shamed and saddened by Rafiq's experiences and committed to wide-ranging and tangible action. You talk about initial steps. The issue of racism and discrimination in cricket is nothing new. What makes this plan any different to previous plans?
Well, I think that will be the proof will be in how we deliver it. This will be the first time the game has come together to take such urgent and direct action.
Despite some counties having suggested a possible vote of no confidence in him, Harrison said he'd been backed today. English cricket's leadership have come up with a broad direction of travel, acknowledging the sorry state of the game needs addressing quickly. But with the soul and survival of the sport at stake, they must now translate those intentions into meaningful action. Laura Scott, BBC News.
Counter-terrorism detectives investigating the explosion outside Liverpool Women's Hospital last weekend have revealed that the bomb contained ball bearings as shrapnel and could have caused significant injury or death had it detonated properly. Our North of England correspondent Judith Moritz is there for us now. Judith.
Yes, Sophie, there is still a police presence here, and the police say there's still a lot of scientific work to do on the device, but they've learned a lot in the last 5 days, and they now know that it was built of homemade explosives and contained, as you say, ball bearings. They say they're spending a lot of time looking at how the materials for the bomb were purchased, and that's a complex job. They also say that they're not yet certain what caused it to go off. They haven't ruled out the possibility that it exploded unintentionally, and that it was that as the bomber arrived here in the taxi and the vehicle stopped, that might have been what caused it to explode. They say that had the bomb gone off in different circumstances, it would have caused significant injury or death. They say there's no connection between what happened here, what happened at Manchester Arena in 2017. The bombs were very different. They say lastly that they've learned a lot in the last day about the bomber, Ahmad al-Sulaymin, because they've been speaking to his brother, and that's given them information about his early life and his recent state of mind.
Judith, thank you. The president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, has said that he will not stop the flow of thousands of migrants through his country as they try to enter the European Union. In an exclusive interview with the BBC, President Lukashenko admitted that his armed forces may actually be helping migrants cross the heavily guarded border into Poland. Steve Rosenberg spoke to the Belarusian leader at the presidential palace in Minsk.
It's not often you get the chance to meet the man who's been labelled Europe's last dictator. The West says Alexander Lukashenko is using migrants as a political weapon. We confronted him with claims his troops have been cutting border fences to help migrants into the EU.
Our guys are helping the migrants get into the Polish territory. It's perfectly possible. I think that's absolutely possible. Maybe someone helped them. I won't even look into this.
Thousands of migrants have been coming to Belarus to try to slip into Europe. Alexander Lukashenko denies bringing them here, but he warned the EU 6 months ago. You told the EU that Belarus had been stopping migrants, but that now they'd have to catch them themselves. The migrants took that to mean Belarus is open to them.
I told the EU I'm not going to detain migrants on the border, hold them at the border, and if they keep coming from now on, I still won't stop them. Because they're not coming to my country, they're going to yours. The West stopped talking to us and working with us. If you don't want to, then fine. We'll sort this problem out ourselves, as best we can.
This was Belarus last year. Alexander Lukashenko under intense pressure, accused of rigging an election and stealing the presidency. But he launched a brutal crackdown on his critics and on civil society. We saw protesters being beaten, and we saw young people coming out of detention centres with injuries on their bodies.
Okay, I admit it.
You admit it?
People were beaten at the Akrestina detention centre. But there were police beaten up too, and you didn't show this.
Since July, 270 NGOs have been shut down in Belarus.
I'll answer your question with no bother. We'll massacre all the scum that you, the West, have been financing. Oh, you're upset that we've destroyed all your structures, your NGOs, and all those that you've been paying for.
Europe doesn't see Mr. Lukashenko as a legitimate president. He claims not to care. A pariah in the West. He knows there's always President Putin's Russia to fall back on. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Minsk.
The Brexit Minister, David Frost, says significant gaps remain across most issues relating to the Northern Ireland Protocol. That's the part of the Brexit deal designed to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland. The UK and the EU have been holding talks to try to ease the row about trading arrangements for Northern Ireland. From Brussels, Jessica Parker reports.
The UK may have left the EU, but Britain is still here talking.
Hi, morning everybody.
Because of issues with the treaty that both sides signed up to.
Our preference is to see if we can find a negotiated way through this problem. If we can't, Article 16 remains on the table.
That means potentially suspending parts of the protocol. So, how are discussions going?
I wouldn't expect any breakthroughs on anything today, but there are some issues that we're making better progress on than others. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Then in for those talks, which happen in private. A haulage firm in County Antrim. They've had to adjust to post-Brexit changes, extra paperwork for goods coming from Great Britain, after Northern Ireland continued to follow certain EU rules. The EU's proposed easing checks. The UK wants to go further and change how the treaty is policed. Here, they want clarity.
We need to know what next year is going to look like. We need to know what next week is going to look like. The uncertainty is where we're at currently, and we need Europe and the UK to get together to thrash this out and get a deal.
There are ripples of movement in areas like medicine supply. One minister said he's confident of progress without suspending parts of the protocol, a move that could lead to a wider trade dispute. Things seem calmer than they were, the EU giving this message earlier.
Right now, we need the UK government to reciprocate the significant move the EU has made. I noticed and welcome a recent change of tone from the UK government, and we hope that actions will follow the words.
So Lord Frost walked through these doors once again today as talks continue, and the mood music does seem to have improved. But there were always likely to be ups as well as downs in this process. This journey's still got some way to run. Lord Frost leaving Brussels this afternoon. Both sides speak of urgency on talks that aren't quite stuck, rather moving slowly. Jessica Parker, BBC News in Brussels.
The time is coming up to 6:20, our top story this evening. Austria becomes the first country in Europe to make vaccinations compulsory as coronavirus cases on much of the continent hit record numbers.
And coming up, we're live at Children in Need. Tonight's show will feature Ed Sheeran, Oti Mabuse and Zippy from Rainbow.
Coming up on the BBC News channel, the WTA chairman tells the BBC there will be no events in China next year without proof that Peng Shui is safe. She has not been heard from since she made sexual assault allegations against a Chinese government official.
It's already illegal to call or text on a handheld phone while you're driving in the UK, but from next year the rules are getting even tighter. Drivers will be banned from taking photos, filming, searching playlists or playing games, even while stationary on mobiles and tablets. Those who break the law will face 6 points on their licence and a £200 fine. Caroline Davis reports.
Happy birthday to you.
Joe Cairns was 14 years old when his mother last waved him off to school.
I always told him, I love you. Not always would he say it back. Sometimes he would. Got him settled in the van and I waved goodbye to him.
The minibus Joe was riding in was hit by a lorry. The lorry driver was checking his social media on his phone moments before the crash.
Finding that out, I do remember being physically sick. I was, it was just that reaction that my boy was killed for nothing. For likes, checking his social media.
The driver, James Majuri, was jailed for 8 years for dangerous driving. The current law bans driving while texting and calling, but this change will mean that it's easier for police to charge drivers holding their phone, regardless of the reason.
From next year, there'll be very few exemptions for why you're able to hold your phone while you're driving.
One of them will be if you're making an emergency phone call, but another proposed one is if you're paying for something contactlessly, for example a toll or maybe a drive-through restaurant, but your car has to be stationary. You can still use devices like sat-nav, for instance, but they have to be in a cradle.
The law was introduced in 2003 when calls and texts were what most mobiles were used for. Although police can charge drivers with other driving offences if they're using their phone and not in control of their vehicle, this change will close a loophole.
If you get caught now, you're going to get a £200 fine and 6 points on your licence. That is, quite significant. The police will be able to enforce the laws much more strongly.
Joe's family continue to tell his story to make drivers think again about how and when they use their phones.
He had a life, a whole beautiful life to lead. And through somebody's choice that day, they took his life away. And it's no more. And it has to be out there. It has to be how dangerous it is to use your phone whilst you are driving.
That report by Caroline Davis. The Ministry of Justice has said that double child killer Colin Pitchfork has been arrested and returned to prison after being released just 2 months ago. He was jailed in 1988 for raping and murdering two 15-year-olds, Linda Mann and Dawn Ashworth. It's understood he was returned to custody today over a breach of his licence conditions. A jury in the US state of Wisconsin has just reached a verdict in the trial of a teenager who killed 2 men and wounded a third in racial justice protests in August last year. After 4 days of deliberations, jurors found 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty of all charges. The shootings took place during violent protests that followed the police shooting of a black man, Jacob Blake. The Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries says left-wing campaigners have hijacked social media and made people afraid to say what they think. In her first television interview since being appointed, she insists she doesn't want to start a culture war. Our culture editor, Katie Razzle, reports.
She's got a new job. How does the crown fit?
Does it suit me?
Nadine Dorries' appointment as Culture Secretary raised alarm in some parts of the creative industries, but she was relaxed as she toured London's Young Vic Theatre, a far cry from her combative reputation. She's seen by some as a divisive figure who's been vocal on social media, particularly against the left-wing snowflakes, as she's put it, who are killing comedy and suppressing free speech.
There's this kind of image that's been painted of me that I'm going to go out in some kind of culture war battle. It just isn't true.
But them talking about left-wing snowflakes and their woke agenda is quite aggressive.
Well, there are some people who will politicise that. Campaigners who kind of hijack the space that young people would like to occupy to talk about some serious issues, who some on the left who've hijacked that space, and that's who my comments are targeted at.
Liverpool, the great Atlantic port of the north of England.
Nadine Dorries is Culture Secretary and a best-selling novelist whose books are based on her upbringing in a deprived part of Liverpool. She says she went hungry as a child and shared shoes to go to school.
And so I made it my ethos in the department within 24 hours of arriving. Every decision we take has a filter, and that is, does this policy help those from socially deprived areas to access both arts and culture and sport?
We express our solidarity with our Vietnamese.
She got a sneak preview at a rehearsal for the Young Vic's new play. This theatre is one of 925 cultural organisations in England, the majority outside the capital, that she's today announced will share more than £100 million from the government's Culture Recovery Fund. It's the latest instalment to help them through the pandemic.
Many theatres would not be standing today if the government hadn't supported them over the last 20 months. The funding we're doing now is to help people through the recovery period.
Nadine Dorries has taken on the beasts in the TV jungle.
Oh, God, it's horrible!
It's the media jungle she's taking on now, as she decides the price of the BBC licence fee over the next 5 years. She's long been a vocal critic of the BBC.
You could hear the almond milk latte cups hitting the floor across the BBC when my job was announced.
Now perhaps there's a change of tone.
Of course I want the BBC to survive. I'm British. You know, it's the best of British. Of course I want the BBC to survive. That's why we have to have those really hard discussions about how do we enable it over the long term to remain that global institution.
She's the 10th Culture Secretary in 10 years. Not many have faced the criticism from the start that she has. Nadine Dorries says the reaction to her appointment was snobbish and sexist. Will her actions in the role change their views? Katie Razzle, BBC News.
Andrew Marr has announced he is leaving the BBC after 21 years, saying he is keen to get his own voice back. The 62-year-old journalist said he would now focus on writing and presenting political and cultural shows for the radio giant Global and writing for newspapers. Patients with a rare genetic condition that causes progressive muscle weakness are to benefit from a new medicine on the NHS in England. Risdiplam is the first oral treatment to be used to treat hundreds of patients with spinal muscular atrophy, which can cause paralysis and sometimes prove fatal. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh reports.
I'm still an incredibly positive person, but I can't deny the effects that this condition has had on me physically in the last couple of years. Good, good, right in my chest.
Chris has a master's in sports management and is a coach.
Remember to push off your index finger.
He also has spinal muscular atrophy, which causes progressive muscle weakness. In the last 2 years, he's lost the ability to walk. He should be eligible for a new treatment, Risdiplam, shown to improve movement and stability.
It'd be huge just to have the certainty that it's not going to get any worse. I may not get back my ability to walk, that's fine. I'm still happy in the skin that I live in. I'm still happy with my lot in life.
Risdiplam is the first oral medicine for SMA, but each bottle has a list price of £8,000 and may last patients just a couple of weeks, although the NHS has negotiated a confidential discount. Having it as a syrup, that really makes a difference, doesn't it?
Oh, yes.
Doctors say the drug works by boosting the levels of a protein crucial for keeping nerve cells healthy.
It really alters the outlook for these people. It gives them a hope for the future. Rather than facing a decline in their condition, further muscle weakness, they can have the hope with treatment to retain those skills.
Hello everyone, I am Melville. 3 years ago, I was the first child in England to test a new medicine that helps with my SMA.
Yes! 9-year-old Melville takes Risdiplam once a day after breakfast as part of a medical trial. His parents hope he may never need a wheelchair because he's now so much stronger.
Basically has now more stamina, is able to handle stairs better.
I have a lot of hope and I'm very happy that it's now available for other families.
And on a day-to-day basis, it's great to see Melville improving a little bit every day.
So you want to put that in?
There is no cure yet for SMA, but the outlook for Melville and hundreds of other patients looks much brighter. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Time now for a look at the weather with Louise Lear. It's getting colder.
Seasonal though, really. I mean, December's just around the corner, so we've got to have a little bit of a chill out there, haven't we? But take a look at Aberdeen this afternoon. This was a boy, not a cloud in the sky to start with. It clouded over a little, but temperatures peaked at 17 degrees. So for the second day in a row, they were the highest values. Now, it does look as though we are heading for a change. I'm going to stay with Aberdeen for the time being. If you take a look at what's to come, a little bit of a roller coaster with the temperatures going from 17 to a cooler feel into the weekend, a little bit of a blip through the middle part of the week, but then as that front clears through, an injection of even colder air Thursday into Friday could bring some wintry showers. Now, although that's Aberdeen, that's the trend generally across the country in terms of the feel of the weather. So, first thing tomorrow morning, we start off with quite a lot of cloud, perhaps through central and southern areas of England and Wales. That cloud will break up for some sunshine. Our weather front sinks into the north of England and North Wales, a band of patchy rain by then, and then behind it, sunny spells and scattered showers. Already starting to feel that cooler air in Scotland, but ahead of that front, we may well still see double digits. But as we move out of Saturday into Sunday, that front still continues to clear away, and it's behind the cold front that the cold air really really digs in. So the northerly winds are going to take over on Sunday, a noticeable difference if you are going to be out and about. So it's going to be a chilly start, touch of frost in sheltered rural areas of Scotland as well. So cold start to Sunday, but hopefully a sunny one. So to compensate, yes, there's going to be a lot more in the way of sunshine than we've seen just recently. That northerly wind adding that chill component and also driving in some showers around the coast. And with any elevation in Scotland, some of those will turn increasingly wintry. In terms of the feel of things, 7 to 10 degrees. As I say, noticeably cooler as we get through the week with some wintry showers later on. Sophie.
Louise, thank you. And that's it from us. We'll leave you now with Pudsey and tonight's Children in Need. Colin Patterson can tell us what's in store. Goodbye from me.
Yeah, Children in Need started in 1980, but this is the first time it's been held in the north. All starts in about half an hour here at Media City in Salford. I saw Ed Sheeran rehearsing earlier on. Now, last year, because of lockdown, there was no studio audience. You will notice they're back and they're enthusiastic. It's as if I rehearsed that. Shorter format tonight as well, all condensed to 3 hours. Those days of Children in Need going into the wee small hours have gone. One thing to look out for, an all-star puppet sing-along. It's like puppets doing Band-Aid. Think big names: Zippy, Bungo, George from Rainbow, Scott and Virgil from Thunderbirds, Basil Brush, Gordon the Gopher. That is a lot of ego for one room. A lot of money has already been earned this year. Owen Wynne Evans, the BBC's drumming weatherman, managed to earn £3 million. We're going to end the 6 o'clock news with a moment he played the BBC News theme with 57 drummers. Take it away.
Hello and welcome along to Sports Day. I'm Sarah Mulcairns. Coming up on the programme. After a week like no other, cricket chiefs in England and Wales apologise unreservedly, saying racism and discrimination is a blight on the game. While Australian cricket has a painful moment, their captain has quit after sending explicit text messages.
To Australian cricket fans, I'm deeply sorry that my past behaviour has impacted our game on the eve of the Ashes.
And the Women's Tennis Association tells the BBC there will be no events in China next year without proof that Peng Shuai is safe. Well, also coming up in the programme, as Qatar gets ready to host its first Formula One Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton wears a rainbow-coloured helmet, saying the sport is duty-bound to raise awareness of human rights issues. And we will look ahead to the final round of fixtures in the men's and women's autumn internationals, with Twickenham hosting a rematch of the World Cup final.